Week we saw reports of one particular item selling out, just like during the pandemic. A viewer asked, during the recent port strike, I saw a post that said that most of our toilet paper is made in the United States. Is that true? Well, here's our Victor Puente with the answer to that good question.
Well, had that strike continued, it could have disrupted some products. Toilet paper wouldn't have been one of them. Panic buying is a much greater threat to the TP supply than closed ports. Charmin is produced by Procter & Gamble at a plant in Mehoopany, Pennsylvania. They also have plants in Georgia, Utah, Missouri, Wisconsin, and California. Cottonelle is made by Kimberly-Clark at a factory in Jenks, Oklahoma. Kimberly-Clark also manufactures Scott toilet paper in Chester, Pennsylvania, as well as Oklahoma and South Carolina. Finally, Angel Soft and Quilted Northern are both produced by Georgia Pacific with plants in Wisconsin, New York, Louisiana, and Georgia. That strike could have had an impact on how that product feels. According to the NC State College of Natural Resources, quote, while more than 99% of tissue products used by Americans are produced in the U.S., manufacturers rely heavily on eucalyptus pulp imported from Brazil. Eucalyptus pulp contains short fibers that make toilet paper soft and absorbent. The expert they talked to said a worst-case scenario would be a change in the type of toilet paper that consumers bought, but they would still be able to manufacture plenty of product. If you have a good question, just email us. Goodquestion@WKYT.com. I'll see you on WKYT Mornings.